Welcome, everyone, to the Week 11 edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, the Waiver Wire edition of the RotoWire podcast, of course, brought to you by our friends at Circa Sports. A bit better of a waiver wire period, a few running backs, a few receivers that are worth noting. We're going to get to all those guys, at least who you should be thinking about, who we should be trying to target as we get closer to the fantasy football trade deadline, and what could likely be the postseason for a lot of folks in a couple of weeks. So let's get to the music here. Again, welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at Twitter on JB Fantasy Sports. Alongside me every week, Jake Letarski at RotoJake. We got Week 10 in the books, obviously. Offense actually took place, Jake. It was wonderful to see. And we're going to have a lot of the bad bye teams now to come. So 4 teams on bye this week. It's the Falcons, Colts, Patriots, Saints. Of those 4, you're missing Bijan Robinson, a few of the scrubby guys for the Colts, Patriots.
Basically all the guys that you want to save from yourself, right? Bijan, Ramondre, Derek Carr, Michael Thomas, all these players that you keep starting because you feel like you have to, and now you're actually forced to bench them.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think we're going to enter that period for a lot of teams, maybe a few good offenses left, but for the most part, the Eagles, Dolphins, Chiefs, those types of teams all happened over the past couple of weeks. So that's fantastic. Jeff Rogers is asking if we should pick up Noah Brown. We'll get to that, Jeff, in a little bit in terms of what Noah Brown's fantasy value is. Another electric game for the Texans receiver. And I want to jump right into it, Jake, in terms of our top 5 list.
Exactly.
Because,
let's go.
We have some same names for a lot of this that we've repeated over past weeks. But I think there is a changing of the guard, at least for a few of these lower end fantasy guys that you might want to consider.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just go ahead and start. I put Noah Brown as my number 1 pickup here. I'll admit that he was not on my radar last week after because he came out with a limited practice, right? And then of course he ended up not practicing Thursday, because Nico Collins came out with a limited practice, and then Collins ended up not practicing Thursday and Friday. So even with Robert Woods back, Noah Brown was massive. He was wide receiver 2 behind Tank Dell in snap share, in route runs, in air yards, 133 air yards. Finished with 7 for 172, which means he's doing it after the catch too. So he's he looks good. I think this Texans offense is awesome. Stroud is awesome, and you got to continue to get pieces of that. That being said, no, Jeff, I would not drop Zay Flowers for Noah Brown. Yeah,
Flowers, 5 catches for 73 yards last week. Clearly the number 1 receiver in offense. It's pretty good. They have a tough matchup Thursday.
Yep.
But what you mentioned with Noah Brown, I think, is key here, that regarding Nico Collins specifically, if he returns, does Noah Brown still have the same value? Robert Woods has been banged up the past 2 weeks as well. So while I think this offense is good enough to have multiple guys have fantasy success, once Nico Collins returns, I just don't see Noah Brown getting 150-plus yards.
I think you carry them all, and you wait for the carousel of injuries. And there'll be opportunities like this where when one of those 4 guys gets hurt, the other 3 are all going to be pretty fantasy viable. And even though Robert Woods is out there for 61% of snaps, I mean, he only got 3 targets compared to 8 for Noah Brown. You could say there's, a little bit of warm-up, a little bit of easing in, and Woods was 1 for 15. So, who knows what kind of role he'll have.
Yeah, so you have Noah Brown, number 1 on your list, still available in 75% of Yahoo leagues, which is important to note, even though it feels like we've been talking about him now for a month. My number 1 guy is Ty Chandler, running back for the Vikings. Obviously, Cam Akers last week went on injured reserve with another Achilles tear. That's tough for him. Alexander Madison suffered a concussion in Sunday's win over the Saints. We know the history of concussions in the NFL this year. You typically miss at least 1 game. Last week was a burn on my budget on Keaton Mitchell. We'll talk about him in a little bit as well, too. If you didn't do that, and you need a running back this week, and you might, given the bye weeks, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, stuff like that, Ty Chandler is absolutely my top pick, and I think will be a very easy flex play, even in a tougher matchup this week.
A tougher matchup? Doesn't he have the Broncos this week?
Yeah, well, you're right. You're right. I guess I'm thinking of the Broncos' defensive past years, and that's not fair.
We have
they've still looked good even with the fumbles.
The Broncos played good against the Bills last night. We didn't touch on Monday Night Football. We don't really do that anymore. But they turned Josh Allen over all these times, and the fumbles and whatnot. But really, the Broncos, they're terrible against running backs. They're at least going into last week, they were 32nd against opposing backs in standard formats. that's the team that, remember, the Dolphins ran all over A-Chain
I know,
and
but
Mostert,
the Packers
and that probably
didn't do a
skews
whole lot
the
against
stats.
them.
If you're looking
recently.
I'm sure from a DVOA type metric, the Packers are pretty close to dead last, but from a fantasy points per game allowed, purely that, and maybe not. That's not the right stat to look at. Maybe you do want to be looking at some DVOA, but the Broncos. Dead last in fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs, as in they're giving up the most, is what I'm saying. So it's a great matchup. And then they have the Bears, which, again, they're below average against opposing backs, 22nd. And then, of course, they have a bye week. So just know that the Vikings haven't had their bye yet. So that's important for me. I certainly like Chandler because, he's just kind of the guy there by default, right? With Akers out, Madison will miss a game. Kene Nwangwu played.
Typically the return guy, right? Like that's part of
he
this.
played like 19% of
snaps.
Yeah, he played 19% of snaps in the fourth quarter. So it was like Madison took 62% of snaps in the first half, then suffered the concussion in the third quarter. Chandler played 75% in the fourth quarter. Kenny Nwangwu 19%. So I'm sure RB2 is going to be someone that gets elevated from the practice squad or signed or something along those lines.
I was going to say I wish I knew the practice squad a little bit better.
I don't know.
I couldn't tell you. I think there's a realm where there's some guys that might actually be more viable than Ty Chandler. I don't think he's actually very good at the game of football, but by default, he becomes a top fantasy option this week with Alexander Madison likely not playing given the history of concussions this season.
Skill-wise, I'm definitely not sold on it. Like, he's had similar opportunities in the past and never really made that leap, but this is just all opportunity. It's an all totally opportunity play right now. And I had Chandler down at 4 on my list because my number 2 and 3 are maybe cheat codes. One's 48% and one's 50%, and they're retreads from last week. But, hey, 50% is our threshold, right?
The way we do these top 5 lists, I always try to at least get some people that at least are in my leagues, which are not that deep, but certainly, you're deeper than the ones that you're recommending. I want to at least prioritize them a bit higher. So
my mindset is I just want to pick up the player that's going to help my team the most that's underneath the threshold here. So that's why I put Keaton Mitchell at number 2 on my list, because he's only 48% rostered. There's, of course, going to be some questions about usage, right? Keaton Mitchell, if there's he would have grade A skill and maybe grade C- opportunity, whereas Chandler is maybe grade C- skill and grade A opportunity, right? So it's the opposite, absolutely the other way around. But Keaton Mitchell scored that touchdown early last week on a nice play, then wasn't really used a whole lot the rest of the game. But as far as someone that has rest of season upside, Keaton Mitchell far more than Ty Chandler. And then my number 3 too, Devin Singletary, 50%, right on the dot. Kind of a cheat code, but he is RB1 in that Texans offense that we have been discussing. Let me see.
Yeah, Pierce has been injured, but Singletary might have just taken that job no matter what if Pierce comes back. And
he carried the ball 30 times on Sunday for 150 and a score. I mean, that is elite level production. It should be his job.
Yeah, it's a good offense and a guy that's getting more involved in there. That he's at 50% roster, I'd imagine for most folks, means that he's not available. So that's why I had Ty Chandler 1. I have Noah Brown number 2. I split my number 3 with a guy that, in the case of who is available this week as opposed to long-term value. So I have Rondale Moore and A.T. Perry tied at my number 3 spot. So Rondale Moore, obviously, 30-year second-year receiver for the Cardinals, a dynamic threat that we thought would get more involved when you had a better quarterback play than just Josh Dobbs. And of course, Kyler Murray makes his return, does pretty good, still running around, looks like the Kyler Murray of old, and lo and behold, Rondale Moore had more value. Then there's A.T. Perry, the rookie receiver for the Saints. Michael Thomas was injured pretty early on in that loss to the Vikings. It sounds like it's going to be a significant long-term injury. The Saints are on bye this week, so maybe A.T. Perry doesn't have value for then. But rest of season, this is a guy that ran a 4.47 at the 40-yard dash at the Combine. I think is going to be a really impactful receiver when you have Derek Carr or Jameis Winston throwing behind center for the Saints. And again, they're on bye this week, but I think rest of season is a guy I want on my roster if Michael Thomas is missing most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like A.T. Perry is someone that'll cost you 0. He's 0% rostered. I believe that after this week he'll be 99% free, and then we'll get some context on Michael Thomas, and then maybe he becomes interesting there. I've just been burned so much by Saints this year, and you never really quite know what it's going to be. So
I'm a little. It was going to be with Michael Thomas. That was a formality entering the season. I try to talk you out of it.
He was consistent. I mean, there's a value in a player who's getting 8 to 10 fantasy points a week for the first 8 9 weeks of the season. Yes, now he got hurt, but he wasn't losing me matchups. I'll say that.
You didn't get burned. We knew what Michael Thomas was going to be. He's always going to get injured. He's always going to be blah. It's fine. All right. So you had Ty Chandler, number 4.
Yep.
Who is your 5th guy?
I threw Brandon Cooks on here from the Cowboys again. Maybe overreacting to a pretty big game here, and obviously you have the opponent that's the Giants. But Brandon Cooks had the game of I think our note says breaks out of a 2-year slump or no maybe something like that.
That's great.
But 9 to 10 targets for 173 and a touchdown. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is that guy. But it's clear now that it's Cooks is wide receiver 2 and maybe Ferguson's wide receiver 3 ahead of Gallup. I saw a couple people even in deep leagues dropping Gallup this week. Of course, you can do that because that's fair. But no, Brandon Cooks, this could have been maybe a little bit of an awakening moment that Dak realized he has something here, or maybe the offense is at least in the passing game is starting to really click. Now, Cowboys are great at beating up on bad teams. We'll see if they have a little bit of that Dolphins syndrome when the schedule heats up here. But there's it's a pretty nice schedule for the rest of the season for them. Just that division in general has some good fantasy matchups here. So I threw Cooks at number 5. He's only 38% rostered. He was someone that was drafted a lot early on, then people kind of got frustrated with his production, and then he had to buy, so the ownership went down, and then I had to take a look, man, 38%. And also, I did want to make a point on Keaton Mitchell and Singletary. While they're 48% and 50% in Yahoo leagues, they're far lower in like NFL.com leagues when I was scoping around. So that could still help some. And I mean, I don't remember the exact figure. I should have wrote it down, but I mean, we were talking around 35% for these guys. So definitely, you want to take a look.
Well, you had mentioned Brandon Cooks. I actually like Rico Dowdle, the backup running back for the Cowboys, because they play the Panthers this week. We just watched the Cowboys annihilate a very bad football team of the Giants. I would imagine the Panthers offense might be a bit more competent, not that much more. But I think the Cowboys will once again be insane. And we have seen now repeatedly, multiple times this season, when there is times where the Cowboys are just annihilating an opponent, they don't really need to utilize Tony Pollard to the extent that fantasy managers would have hoped entering the season. And Dowdle, backup running back for the Cowboys, got a lot of workload last week, and I think it could be the same again this week. So if you missed out on the Ty Chandler sweepstakes, I think Dowdle's another consolation prize in deeper leagues.
Yeah, an interesting stat that I didn't mention with Cooks that was maybe even like to detract from Cooks is that the Panthers are number 3 against wide receivers, the 3rd best in standard, and 4 in PPR formats. And that shocked me. It's like, how is a team so bad that good against opposing wide receivers? Then I looked, it's because they're so terrible against the run, right? The running backs go nuts, and then they end up with these huge deficits late in games, and then don't have to worry about the defending wide receivers because teams aren't passing in the fourth quarter. So yes, if we have another blowout scenario, Dowdle is interesting. However, I really think he's limited to those types of games. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on. He did have 12 carries compared to 15 for Pollard, but again, most of these guys, I don't believe Pollard played 95% of the snaps before halftime in that game. That's what I was looking up while I was kind of stalling there. So yeah, that's interesting, but I don't see him as much more than a Pollard handcuff at this point.
That's fine. I'm just saying they play the Panthers. They're favored by 11.5 points despite this game being in Carolina next week. You might just need a 1-week starter, and that's totally fine. So Rico Dowdle makes my list top 5. And the final one, just to split between quarterbacks here, Matthew Stafford and Russell Wilson. Obviously, Wilson leads the team, and the officials lead the team for the Broncos over the Bills last night. I think Russell Wilson's looked pretty good, and that touchdown pass to Cortland Sutton felt like vintage Russell Wilson. And then the pass interference to Jerry Jeudy felt like what we've seen of Russell Wilson the past 2 years, just a complete miss on the throw. A very Jordan Love-esque 5 yards.
That ball had the most hang time. The most hang time I have ever
for a 25-yard throw.
Yeah, for a 20, exactly. He just I don't know if he was getting hit or what, but it was going against the all-out blitz. He was about to get murdered, chucked it straight up in the air. So there's your Monday Night Football recap.
Again, as a fan of the officials, man, I am eating this season. It's been a fantastic year for my fandom. Don't ask about any other teams besides that. So, Russell Wilson against the Vikings. Obviously, Vikings defense isn't all that good, and that you have Matthew Stafford starting against the Seahawks defense, also not all that good to consider if you need to stream some quarterbacks. So that does it for us on our top 5 list. Again, Jake's top 5 list, a bit more of the top end guys that are likely not available in some formats. Noah Brown, number 1, Keaton Mitchell, number 2, Singletary, number 3, Ty Chandler, 4, Brandon Cooks 5. I want the more extreme route with guys that are rostered or at least not rostered. Ty Chandler makes my top overall list. Then Noah Brown, who again only 25% rostered Yahoo leagues. A.T. Perry or Rondale Moore, both under 10%. And Jake mentioned you could probably get Perry next week because the Saints are on bye. Then there's Rico Dowdle going against the Panthers this week, and Matthew Stafford or Russell Wilson to end our top 5 list. Real quick, let's get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire, and then we'll dive right into the running backs. All right, we're back in talking running backs overall. I had mentioned Ty Chandler was number 1 on my list and probably needs to be at least considered in every format, given that Alexander Madison, we anticipate, will not play next week after suffering a concussion in that win over the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of said at the beginning of the show, the skill, the eye test, all these kinds of things aren't really there. And he didn't have any catches on 8 routes. That's the other note that I had. But like I said, the opportunity is going to be elite. There's no Cam Akers. There's almost certainly no Madison. Then he's got a return guy and a practice squad guy to compete with for touches here against the worst run defense in the league in terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs here. So there's a lot to like about Chandler's matchup. But I truly believe that it's only a 1-week thing, and that's why, I'll say it again. You have to at least look for Devin Singletary and Keaton Mitchell because those guys are right at the 50-50 threshold. Those are better pickups. And because, Singletary's RB1 rest of season. Mitchell's a viable flex the rest of the season, even if he's not RB1. Chandler is really good for 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, and then bye week. So, but at which point Madison will be back. So yeah, yes, I'm interested in Chandler this week. Yes, I will make bids on him this week. But it's not. I don't think he's someone that I'm going to blow all my the remaining FAAB budget for, just because I still want to save a little bit, I guess.
So I have Alvin Kamara in a few leagues, and I have Jonathan Taylor in a few leagues, and I know you do too. Mm-hmm. In the event that one of those two guys,
I've actually been successfully trading Jonathan Taylor away. I'm down to 1 Jonathan Taylor.
Okay, good job, good job on that. In the event that I'm missing one of those guys, I am going all in the FAAB budget because I think Ty Chandler does end up playing a decent amount this week. Uncle Ted in the comments mentioned Dwayne McBride likely gets called from the practice squad. That's actually important to me because I had McBride, and we had talked about him at the beginning of the season before we even doing our drafts. Like I thought McBride was actually the best backup for the Vikings. Of course, they traded for Cam Akers pretty early on. McBride never made the active roster, has been bounced around in the practice squad quite a bit to the active roster, never playing. But that was a guy in Minnesota that actually was a talented running back, and we've never been able to say the same about Ty Chandler in the NFL or in college. So while
7th round pick out of UAB.
Yeah, I was going to say Minnesota. I'm not sure why I said Minnesota.
Because he plays for the Vikings.
Well, no, I thought it's whatever. I always mention
1,700 yards and 19 touchdowns at UAB. Not bad.
I'm a disciple of Mario Puig and John McKechnie, and they have been touting Dwayne McBride now for a while. Touting, I mean, he was a day 3 pick for a reason, but they think that he's pretty good. So when they're on a guy, they're normally right. And they have also been really off Ty Chandler. So it's a 1-2 combo that makes me a little bit nervous. That being said,
I think both of those guys are going to end up with like 12 carries for 36 and 38 yards.
No.
It's how that's going to go. I mean, no. Okay. So maybe 48 and 50 yards because it's the Broncos.
Maybe. I feel like McBride probably gets like 14 carries.
14?
In that 70 to 80 yard range. And then I could see McBride getting 6 or 7 as well, too, depending on what the score.
You said McBride first. I was like, wait a minute. McBride's going to get 14 carries?
No.
So just a quick correction. You think Chandler gets 14 carries in the 80 yard range? Okay.
Yes, Ty Chandler, 14 carries, 80-yard range, and McBride, maybe that 6 to 7 range.
That's a little more reasonable than what we were going with at the beginning.
I still like Keaton Mitchell more, and obviously you mentioned Singletary as well, too. Rest of season, I think Keaton Mitchell really does have a lot of fantasy value because he is electric. It was the same thing I said last week. I got it wrong with Devon Achane. I'm not getting it wrong with Keaton Mitchell, and I think that offense rest of season is going to be better in the Ravens than anything else. So that's one of the names. I mentioned Rico Dowdle as well, too. They play the Panthers this week. That's all I need. If I am really hurting at running back, again, Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor out. I have a lot of Kamara and not a lot of backup options. It's Zach Charbonnet and Rico Dowdle for me. I might be playing Rico Dowdle. That's how confident I feel the Cowboys will kick the butts of the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, we've been recommending Charbonnet for a couple of weeks where we still like where his direction is headed. It's really the same story last week where, yes, he's trending in the right direction. Still the production's not there yet. So, I agree with that. I guess if it was down to Dowdle or Charbonnet, I'd probably start Dowdle next week there. So, yeah, throwing that out there here. Did I have anything else on Dowdle? Yeah, Carolina, second most points to opposing running backs in standard and PPR formats, if I hadn't mentioned that before. So, definitely a matchup that you want to look at this week, but I think it's a one and done. I could easily see you cutting him, a week after this week when he gets some higher usage.
This isn't on the show sheet, but Jake, I think you and I could probably talk confidently about this. I have no idea what the value of A.J. Dillon is right now, but this might be one of the few weeks where I feel confident saying you could play A.J. Dillon going against the Chargers defense in Lambeau. I think he's probably rostered like 60% of leagues. But
see, he was. I actually have him in the Invitational because somebody dropped him. He's rostered in 60% of leagues, Yahoo leagues. So perfect. I mean, that means he's available in 40%. You have another good stream. I'd take Dillon over Chandler this week probably.
I would too. Yeah, actually, I would as well too. That's how confident I feel that the Packers will at least run the ball often and will have opportunities against that defense, which has been not very good when teams have chose to run the ball against the Chargers defense. So that's another one to consider. And along the same vein is the Bears trio of running backs, and Khalil Herbert is getting closer to getting activated off injured reserve. Remember, that's how Deonta Foreman became a thing because Herbert was placed on injured reserve. There's still Roschon Johnson impacting things as well, too, for the Bears, although very lackluster. And then Fields likely is playing this week against the Lions, who are favored by double-digit points in that contest, too. So is there any one of those that is interesting to you?
I mean, Khalil Herbert's interesting, right? I mean, 66% rostered. It's not like there's a ton of availability. I mean, for me, I held on to him in leagues that I had an IR spot, cut him in leagues that I didn't.
Yep.
But he's someone that you definitely look at because I don't think neither of us think particularly highly of Deonta Foreman, but Deonta Foreman must have done enough to separate himself from Roschon Johnson given the significant advantage he has in snaps and touches. I think Khalil Herbert gets into that mix and also has a role as a pass catcher here, so I would absolutely take a look at him. And then the only other name I wrote down here, Tajay Spears. I know he gets a footnote every single week. This week he actually had like 10 PPR points, outscored Derrick Henry by like 6 or 7 points.
Frustrating.
Yeah, very frustrating. But yeah, Tajay Spears is interesting to me, and he's only 40% rostered, so I could very easily, like, if you don't need a running back to start this week and you're stashing, I'd probably put Tajay Spears over Chandler on the list.
I would drop Spears for Chandler. Like I think. I mean, it depends. It's rest of season.
If you need a starter or if it's rest of season. Rest of season, it's easily Spears. Need a starter, it's Chandler.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm seeing a lot of trade questions in the chat. We'll get to those at the end of the show. But Samuel asks, do you pick up Jalen Guyton or Quentin Johnston given Keenan Allen's shoulder injury? Keenan Allen, it's listed as day-to-day. That doesn't impact things too much. But we will talk about the Chargers receivers and other receivers here right after our word from our sponsor, Circa Sports. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sundays in Las Vegas this year. You can watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects going on all throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more, or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the Big Game Bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences. February 11th, the big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. I also want to get a word from our sponsors. Splash. RotoWire is proud to sponsor and partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pick X, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sports books, Splash Books pits you against your friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tier contests on Splash all season long. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. So last week we had talked about receivers, Tank Dell, Demario Douglas, Darius Slayton. There have been a few other guys. And I think Noah Brown certainly is the top option on the list this week. And again, it matters the status of Nico Collins, but Noah Brown might just be playing his way into the role regardless.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I said most of what I had to say on Noah Brown right at the beginning. I ranked him as my number one pickup. I like what I saw. Obviously, 172 yards is not a fluke when you're targeted 8 times and you catch 70 of them. And he did a lot of that after the catch. So I think everybody, Noah Brown, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell are all absolutely should be rostered. Robert Woods, I'm a little bit more hesitant on. He only had 1 catch in his return. Maybe they're easing him back in. But those top 3 guys should all be rostered, and they're a decent enough flex play when people are healthy, and they suddenly become an elite play when any one of those guys is injured. So we're looking at that. And plus, the Texans already had their bye. They're coming up. They're home against the Cardinals, they're home against the Jags, and they're home against the Broncos in their next 3 matchups. It's a great all those teams are dead center of the pack or lower in fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receiver per game. And, we'll see what's going on with Nico Collins, too, because remember, if you didn't catch us at the start of the show, he was limited to start the week and then was downgraded to out on Thursday and Friday. So, trending in the wrong direction here. We'll see what's going on with that calf injury and, how long of an absence that might be. So, Noah Brown was my top guy.
Then there's Demario Douglas, who we've talked about in past weeks, still involved, easily the team's top pass catcher.
Yeah.
Bailey Zappi might be your quarterback after the bye. Whatever. You can still have a good pass catcher on a bad team, and I think that's what Demario Douglas is for the Patriots.
Yeah, I wanted to make a note on Demario Douglas, even though he wasn't in my top 5 with the bye week upcoming having a lot to do with that. To me, if you woke up early and watched that, was it Germany? I forget. And watched that game, Demario Douglas definitely looked. He passed the eye test in it. Now 74% of snaps and 88% of routes. Technically, he was second to Juju Smith-Schuster in both, but Juju only had 1 target for 9 yards and 10 air yards. So it was really weird that Juju was out on the field for all of that time and was so little involved in the offense here. Whereas Demario Douglas, right, 9 targets, ends up with 6 for 84. Obviously, the problems are one. Demario Douglas is the other note I had. Only player to see more than 5 targets on the whole team. But then we have the problems here, right? That the Patriots aren't by. I'm holding him in my 16-team leaguer. He's not a cut option for me this week. I'm gonna stick through it and think of him as a possible flex option rest of the season. Like he's producing more for me than like a Jameson Williams in that type of format, which is which are the kind of flex options I'm looking for. I'm looking at. And then, of course, there's a QB situation post-bye. Belichick basically rage benched, like when someone rage quits Madden, right? He rage bench Mac Jones so he could yell at him in that final drive while he sent Bailey Zoop out to
Zoopy. We're back to this. This is something we did last year.
It's never going to get out of my head. The Patriots fan behind me at the Packer game insisted it was pronounced Bailey Zupa.
We are over
it was
a year
like it was
on
like
this.
an Italy thing. The guy insists, and I can look right back to that guy thinking Bailey Zupa. I swear it's Bailey Zappi. It's Bailey. The guy was so sure, like dead confident, serious. Anyway, Bailey Zappi. In that last drive, he did look almost exclusively to Pop Douglas. So I think. Well, one, you can't get much worse than how Mac Jones has been playing now, right? And 2, if Zappi is dialing in on Douglas the same over the course of a full game, I wouldn't be surprised to see double-digit targets a few more times the rest of the season. So Douglas interests me a lot.
Real quick, Randy Miller asks, is Noah Brown a must-start with no Nico Collins? I don't know if that's the case in a lot of matchups, but the way the Texans offense is playing, and when we have information that Nico Collins is not out there, yes, it would obviously depend on who you have available, but right now, again, with 4 teams on bye, a lot of injuries throughout the season, I would imagine for most people, Noah Brown is a must start, especially if you're having multiple flex plays or something like that.
Okay, he did put some context in there. He said he has Gibbs, Breece Hall,
well,
and
he was also asking about Keaton Mitchell. Is he a must start with those running backs?
Oh.
So no, it was no on Keaton Mitchell.
Yeah, so you never know.
Gibbs, Breece Hall, and Jerome Ford.
Yeah, you might just be fortunate enough to have the team stack. There's no player outside of the top 5 at each position that is a must start. Necessarily.
Right.
There always is context. So, but in this case, it seems like he should be someone you get there. All right, moving down the list, we kind of already took Brandon Cooks. We talked about that already.
Yeah, Uncle Ted has like some insane optimism for Brandon Cooks. Just so you understand, would you have Noah Brown or Brandon Cooks rest of the season? Where are you at?
Noah Brown. I ranked him number 1 over Cooks.
I would
on my
have
list
Noah
this
Brown.
week.
I would have a lot of receivers over Brandon Cooks. I think this was kind of a mirage. And I get concerned that in bad matchups like he has against the Panthers this week, you can say, oh, well, this passing attack is only going to be available for a half. And then in good matchups, aren't you just throwing to CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson? And
Yeah. Well, that's the
why
thing.
are you
CeeDee
targeting
Lamb is
Brandon Cooks a
definitely
lot?
the guy. And you know what was fun here? I put some devil's advocate notes on here. Okay, so here's a point against Cooks. He only had 5% more snaps and 3 more routes than Michael Gallup, and Jalen Tolbert also had more snaps and routes. But again, you can say that this game was over a little bit early here. The other thing, though, after Carolina this week, it's bottom half defenses against opposing wide receivers for the rest of the season for the Cowboys here. So there's a lot of very juicy matchups here. Commanders, Seattle. The only one that's right in the middle is Buffalo, but what are you going to say about them now? So it's a soft rest of season schedule. It's a great. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's about to have an all-time season. Is I guess what I'm going to say.
So should be trying to acquire CeeDee Lamb at this point. That's interesting. I'm looking at the box score. So 4 catches for 36 and a touchdown in week 6 bye, then 3 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown week 8. At no point he's had over 4 targets in just one game prior to last week. Like, I don't know why things changed suddenly, and I don't know if it's just the Giants slot corner or something like that, like a specific matchup. Because why else are they utilizing Brandon Cooks to that extent? I think of zero interest relative to Noah Brown, but maybe in other formats where you need a wide receiver 4 or 5, that's fine. And I know what you're saying with the defenses too, Jake. It's like, are you like, oh, I can't wait to start against the Eagles? I know they allowed a lot of points to fantasy receivers, but it's still a really good defense typically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the Dolphins get Jalen Ramsey, and I don't understand the Brandon Cooks optimism. Uncle Ted has led us astray with Roshan Johnson a number of times, so maybe I should just be ignoring that advice overall. But he also was in Dalton Schultz, who's been really good. So 1 for 1 on Uncle Ted recommendations, who is very, very, very in on Brandon Cooks. Let's continue on with Rondale Moore. And again, the conversation with A.T. Perry. Saints on bye. I understand it's a rookie receiver. If Michael Thomas is done for the rest of the season or something like that, and he had legal troubles also this weekend, I like the idea because the Saints are going to have to pass more. Marshawn Lattimore also suffered an extensive injury as well, too, so that hurts the defense. I know Derek Carr isn't very good. I understand Jameis Winston might be just as good, but that offense can cater 3 receivers with Rashid Shaheed also being in there. And in deeper formats that I'm playing in, Jake, I think A.T. Perry is absolutely worth a stash if you have an available spot. And the same feeling I have for Rondale Moore, who's actually proven it and has Kyler Murray now back under center for the Cardinals. I like both those guys a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very interested in Rondale Moore, actually, and had picked him up in a couple of leagues last week. It was like one of those where I needed to pick up somebody just to kind of fill dead weight on the roster. I'll pick Rondale Moore up just to see if he does better with Kyler Murray. And sure enough, he went and did better with Kyler Murray. Now, technically, he was wide receiver 3 this week, right? Third on the team in snap share and route rate behind both Hollywood Brown and Michael Wilson in both targets. He still had more targets, though, 8 targets, than both players, second to only Trey McBride, who, of course, had 9 targets. And I pulled a stat that Alan Seslowski showed in he does a sneaky ads, which is like the 3-4 minute version of our hour-long video where he just has his handful of top pickups, tries to go under the radar. But he noted that Rondale Moore in 6 healthy games with Kyler Murray last year. Now we had to narrow it down to that. He averaged 7 targets, 5 catches, and over 50 yards per game. So shout out to Alan, great sneaky ads stat there. So makes things interesting for me. I mean, he's at Houston. That could be a game where they're going to have to throw. They're home against the Rams. They're at Pittsburgh, and then they have their bye. And I don't know. None of those teams are elite against receivers in PPR formats. So, Rondale Moore, and he's somebody that it's still early on in his career, right? It's still viable to think he could turn a corner if he got some decent quarterback play. And he's also someone that occasionally gets a carry in the run game, too. So there's a lot of reasons to, consider him with a lot of these receivers on bye.
Yeah, another receiver that theoretically could get better that I'm just completely out on is Jonathan Mingo, who we've mentioned a number of occasions. He continues to get targets, but we're talking about the second worst offense. There's the Patriots still. The second worst offense in the league. I don't care if you're getting 7 targets when you can get 4 yards with them. I'm out on Jonathan Mingo. Unless you're Adam Thielen, there's no business rostering anybody on the Panthers. And I don't think that changes except when they play the Packers in week 13, whatever that is. Joe Barry, we trust, will always make offenses look good, but that's the only scenario where I'm ever picking up anybody besides Adam Thielen.
I mean, Joel Berry will make Chuba Hubbard look like a Pro Bowler. I don't know what Jonathan Mingo.
Absolutely.
But anyway, Jonathan Mingo is only 7% roster. Now, this is one of those where you look at what's going on paper and you think that there's a lot of room to grow behind the scenes, right? So that's kind of why I highlighted him this week. He played every single snap with DJ Shark and Laviska Shenault both inactive. 7 targets is interesting. Obviously not that great when you only turn it into 3 for 20 yards. Adam Thielen got 10 targets. And what else did I have? Mingo actually had more air yards than Adam Thielen. So, he should be putting up better numbers, giving all of these underlying numbers. But, then we have Bryce Young and just the general state of the Panthers offense here. When he does get the ball, he seems to pass the eye test for me. So I don't know if he's going to grow here or if he's going to turn into the next Treylon Burks, the guy that I love, passes the eye test, should be getting more opportunities, can't stay on the field, so I do get a little Treylon Burks syndrome with that. But right now, Jonathan Mingo might be, again, pick it up and stash type of situation here because I do think there's room to grow.
We have talked about the Chargers receivers a lot, specifically Quentin Johnston. I don't know. This might be my version of Treylon Burks as well, too. But Quentin Johnston finally had a pretty good game. Drew 2 pass interference calls, which I wrote about in RotoWire. And the first one, he absolutely should have caught and would have went for like 60 yards and a touchdown. So it would have been a massive day. That he was more involved was really encouraging. Again, the Chargers play the Packers this week. Everyone's going to go off. I mean, that's going to be a 500-yard game for the Chargers. I think Eckler gets 200. Herbert throws for 400, and maybe Joe Barry gets fired after that one. Maybe not. I mean, this is a perfect tank commander. Like that's what you want when you're trying to get a top 5 pick. So I think Joe Barry stays around rest of season. But Jalen Guyton also got 4 catches for 48 yards and a score. I wrote about him as well too on RotoWire. I don't think Guyton becomes a significant factor, but he is getting a ton of playing time, which is going to matter against teams that are going to have a lot of offense. The Packers just won't do that. So I'm not interested in Guyton.
We have to remember that Josh Palmer's out for 2 more weeks, right?
Yep.
And listen, I'm not too worried about Keenan Allen's shoulder injury right now. They're calling him day-to-day with a shoulder injury. I'm not ready to be concerned about this until he misses practice, right? Then maybe these guys bump. But so there are scenarios between now and Sunday where we could where this circumstance could change here for these Chargers receivers. You just want to monitor them as a whole, and maybe Quentin Johnston. There's still room for a breakout, right? He has the draft pedigree. Yeah. You see it in flashes, right? And I think there's nobody arguing that maybe he has more raw skill, at least in terms of size and hands than Guyton. Guyton might have him in the speed department, but
I don't even think that actually. A year off an ACL tear, I think Johnston is just as fast, if not faster than Guyton. Okay. The only value is that Guyton was a good blocker and has been for a while, but that was also like the selling point for Johnston being the first round. The Chargers are just comically mismanaged. I mean that truthfully is all there is. Like Guyton would not even be playing over Dontavian Wicks, who's the Packers' number 4 receiver, to put into some context how bad Guyton is. But that's just what the Chargers are doing and have done. So I'm not interested in him whatsoever. I'm not really interested in Elijah Moore, who feels like the 2 years older version of Jonathan Mingo, but Deshaun Watson looked capable in the second half against the Ravens, so maybe he's someone to monitor as well. I don't know.
Yeah, he's in there. The other one I think we skipped is Trenton Irwin for the Bengals. You what?
I don't care if T. Higgins is back. Trenton Irwin is going to be more like.
But it looks like T. Higgins is going to sit out on Thursday Night Football, right?
Yeah, it's against the Ravens.
Fair enough.
Is there how many leagues are you in, Jake? This year?
8.
Is there any scenario in any of your 8 leagues, and you play in some deep ones, where you're like, if Irwin is available, he goes into my lineup? Because I'm in 15, and I can't find a single one.
Maybe Fishbowl, but for what that's worth, I'm well out of the playoffs there.
But I don't even think in Fishbowl you would be playing Trenton Irwin. Like your team can't need a receiver that bad.
Yeah, you're right. It's tough against Baltimore, but it looks better the rest of the season. But then, of course, Higgins will probably be back. 80% of snaps, 84% of routes, scored a touchdown. We at least got to mention it because he's going to show up on a lot of columns, and he's going to be ranked higher in other areas than us, and we just need to defend our explanation why. But yeah, you're right. It would have to be pretty deep to go that route.
I would rather have Steve Irvin than Trenton Irvin right now. Is that too soon? Can I not make that joke?
Mm-hmm. Sure, go for it. Yeah.
You were like processing.
I was trying to do some sort of. I was actually trying to take it another level and do some kind of Tampa Bay Devil Ray joke, but like it wasn't coming to me. So I couldn't. I couldn't. And then I was like, okay, whatever. Yeah, I thought maybe it would come to me, but we're not quite there.
That's probably good. That's probably good that we only went to that level. I have been asked this question on 4 separate occasions. Is Christian Watson worthy of dropping, Jake?
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously nuance to every question, but if you got to hit me with the yes or no. Yeah, you definitely drop him for some of the names that we've discussed on this show. Now, of course, he's gonna burn. He'd make me eat those words by having some sort of huge game against the Chargers, of course. But it's a weird chemistry there, man. Love's thrown 5 picks when targeting Watson this year. We thought of Watson as a guy that's going to be able to fight for these balls, and he is clearly not that guy. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Dobbs is number 1. I think Reed is number 2, and then you've got I don't see Watson too much higher in the pecking order than Wicks and Musgrave and those types of players. So, sure, drop him.
Tech Wizard Harry is very upset. He's been saying Jaden Reed is the number 1 receiver, and I'm like, no, it's Dobbs. But he disagrees. Both of us agree, though, that either one of those guys is better than Watson. I would rather have Noah Brown. I would rather have Pop Douglas. Even though I don't like Brandon Cooks, I would rather have Brandon Cooks rest of season over Christian Watson. I would rather have Rondale Moore rest of season than Christian Watson. So that's the level in which I'm down on him. The Packers offense isn't very good. Watson has been miserable. Not that he can't turn around. This, like in dynasty formats, it's a different conversation. But if we're talking strictly redraft league, the guy that you're drafting in the 5th or 6th round is not there.
Yeah, listen, guys, and we're going to week 11, right?
Yep.
You shouldn't worry about your draft capital he was a 5th round pick. He's just not producing, so you can cut bait at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Christian Watson is absolutely worth a drop. Real quick with the quarterbacks, we had mentioned Josh Dobbs last week. I think rest of the season really is a guy that is going to be close to quarterback 12, given the rushing floor, and likely getting Justin Jefferson back this week when they take on the Broncos. I had also mentioned Russell Wilson as my top 5 list, but there is Jordan Love too. What's your thoughts on how he's played the last 2 weeks specifically?
I watched, while using the restroom, I watched a nice highlight of Jordan Love's nice throws from this past week. Okay. And
because you have to specify you did in the bathroom. Like, does that matter?
Yeah, no, maybe I didn't need to do that, okay. but it was like right before the show, so that's where. Anyway, maybe I didn't, but no, he when he's on. Jordan Love is capable of making all of these throws. When he gets time, even when he's pressured, he's still capable of making a lot of these throws. So he's very interesting, and he's down to 43% rostered. And I lost the fantasy matchup this week because I didn't have enough faith to put Jordan Love in my lineup and started Derek Carr instead. You could say injuries, whatever. But Love is very interesting. And the Chargers, the Packers offense isn't the Lions offense, but the Chargers defense did not look like they could stop anybody on Sunday. So he's definitely in the conversation here. But as is Russell Wilson, he's heading in the right direction. He's home against the Vikings, who, again, a pretty porous defense there. So all of these options are streamers here. But, the thing is, though, like, who are we really streaming here because of the bye weeks? The Patriots, you weren't streaming Gardner Minshew wasn't your QB1. Right. Taylor Heineke / Desmond Ridder wasn't your QB1. Derek Carr probably wasn't your QB1. I'll probably cut Derek Carr in Stake League, if I'm being honest, this week for some of these options that we discussed here, because he is just right at that complete replacement level. And, we'll see what, whatever happens with his injury. But it's not a huge week for streamers. But, I was looking ahead, like even in my 16-team league where I have Lamar Jackson and I don't have anybody else. And the quarterbacks on the waiver wire are atrocious. Mm-hmm. I use my top waiver claim on Russell Wilson so that by the time week 14 comes around and I'm clawing for that playoff spot, or week 13, whenever their bye is, I actually have a QB2, because I'm starting to think about that because he's not going to stay on the wire after this week. So yeah, it's not a big streaming week, but you can go ahead and pick up guys like Wilson and Love and not sweat too much about dropping them next week or the week after. Because if they don't turn the corner that you thought they would, but maybe things are starting to click a little bit there.
So part of what the streaming option isn't just guys that are on bye, but also who's playing against who. So, for example, are you playing Matthew Stafford or Jordan Love over Deshaun Watson, who has the Steelers this week and just allowed Love to look pretty good?
Yes, I would play them over Deshaun Watson.
Okay. Would you play Kyler Murray over Stafford or Jordan Love?
Murray against the Texans in a
Yeah.
shootout. I'm going to play Murray over both
I
those
think
guys.
I'm playing Murray as well, too. And
All
then the
three
other
of
one
those
I
guys,
have to
yeah.
imagine people are asking, do you play Trevor Lawrence over either Stafford or Jordan Love? Lawrence going against the Titans defense this week.
Yeah, they're at home. That over-under is under 40. Oof. No, I still probably go Jordan Love in that situation.
I'm playing Trevor Lawrence in that one. That's kind of
no, shoot. I meant to say Trevor Lawrence.
Okay.
Even with that, yeah. No, you're right. I don't know. I subconsciously said Jordan Love. What about Justin Fields coming back at Detroit? How does he fit into this mix?
I would be playing Russell Wilson or Stafford over Justin Fields. I don't know about Jordan Love. So can I rant on like a minute and a half here on Jordan Love?
You can give me 30 seconds here. I don't know.
Good 30
I've
second
had
rant
about
on
enough.
Jordan Love.
Yeah,
that like if that happens, if that game against the Steelers, game where he throws for 250 yards, some really good throws. That touchdown pass to Jaden Reed was awesome, but I
the
thought
one to Dobbs was excellent too.
Yeah, the decision-making process throughout the game.
He threw Wicks open while about to get hurt. Yeah, exactly.
If that happens the entire year, my optimism for the Packers, even if they have the same record and Joe Barry is still the defensive coordinator, is miles high because that. I turned to my wife while we were watching that game. This is the first time I felt like Aaron Rodgers, and not like Aaron Rodgers 2010-11 season where they win the Super Bowl, but starting year for Aaron Rodgers. That team went 6-10. They weren't very good. They lost a lot of one-score games. The talent at receiver was way better. The offensive line was way better for Aaron Rodgers in his debut season. But that felt like what I remember in his very first year, and that was encouraging. But if he looks bad again next week, it all goes away. And I understand, Joe, it's a young player. Inconsistencies happen. He's got way worse supporting cast everywhere. But I need to see growth and steady, consistent growth.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't feel confident starting Jordan Love this week. But this was a 2-week stretch now where he's looked good.
I mean, growth is what I saw last week. That was real growth. If he takes a step back or falters, that doesn't completely cancel out the growth that he's made, but then we'll just see how it happens next week. You cannot replicate live game action in the National Football League, no matter where you learn, how many practice reps, whatever you get, and I think he's still getting those reps. I know it's gloom and doom for Packers fans, but I'm not quite there yet.
I'm well past gloom and doom. We're like, I'm okay if we went for Drake.
Okay, listen, I want him to fire Barry. There's no Packer fan that doesn't want them to fire Barry, but I am not completely sold on fire the coach, fire the GM, clean the entire house out, and start over.
I've been there for a month now, and it really hasn't changed, even though they look good. So this is. I mean, like, I guess my pessimism is because I know they won't. Mark Murphy, who is the de facto general manager for the Packers, his mandated retirement age is not the end of this season, but the end of next season. So it'd be very uncomfortable for Mark Murphy to fire Gutekunst, the general manager, and fire Matt LaFleur, and then leave the following year and possibly restart that whole cycle. So everyone's coming back for one more year, and that's why I'm more pessimistic, is that we're just going to have the same crap come over for really a 3-year stretch, because they did not do well even last year in Rodgers' final season. So that's enough Packer ranting.
Yes, exactly.
We're done with that.
I had 30 seconds, 3 minutes, whatever. Anyway,
Sorry.
So where were we? Okay, so quick hits on 2 quarterbacks. I mean, Taylor Heineke exited the game with a hamstring injury. Desmond Ridder came back in, didn't look terrible. Atlanta was on a bye week this week, so can't really do anything with that. Same thing with the Patriots. They're on a bye. Mac Jones rage bench, Bailey Zappi final drive. Who knows if that sticks? Just news and notes. Nothing too crazy in the 2 quarterback league here. Stafford, of course, is expected to be back. He has the bye to prepare. He's interesting. Tight ends here. It's pretty much all retreads for me. Nothing really new on the tight end scope here. Last week we talked about Otten, Juwan Johnson, Jonnu Smith, the Corey Stoll, Albert O combo, and
they were on bye, so we get a pass on that.
Exactly, we do get a pass. I did look yesterday, and Trey McBride is only 59% rostered. That is way too low. He's a top 12 tight end, I think, rest of the season. We were wondering if the Clayton Tune to Kyler Murray, if they were going to get targeted enough. I think the scheme just makes things wide open for McBride, and he's converting all his catches, so he's interesting. And then, 2 guys that have probably made half of our shows all year long, right? Donald Parham, we have to bring up again because Gerald Everett left with a back injury, and Green Bay gets torched over the middle with soft zone. So a big body like Donald Parham is going to have a matchup advantage over any safety the Packers throw at him. especially after Rasul Douglas is no longer in that secondary. And then on the other side of that matchup, I got to shout out Luke Musgrave a little bit. He might have the worst balance among tight ends that I can see, but he's getting targeted in the middle field a lot, and a lot of what we thought was going to happen early in the season is starting to happen again. With this offense is doing well, he is a part of it. Still, that's probably only viable in 2 tight end leagues, or those like the Fishbowl where he's probably already rostered. So anyone to add any comments on those tight ends? It's not really an exciting
the Parham thing will be interesting. You mentioned the Chargers. I don't They only gave him what I think was 29 snaps or 31 offensive snaps. You still had a rotating group of Stone Smarts of the world that were also a factor. Just because it makes sense for Donald Parham to get involved if Gerald Everett would miss time doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. I think sooner Austin Eckler gets 200 combined yards than Donald Parham being a factor over the middle. Like he'll still get 2 catches for 40 yards. It'll be if he gets that third one in the red zone that makes a difference. But yeah, same with Musgrave, the balance thing. I mean, that was his MO coming out of college, which is interesting that it still carries over into professional football here. But
he's going to catch the ball, but he's going to fall to the ground in the process without being touched.
Yeah, pretty reliably. We have a lot of questions from a starting perspective and trade perspective, Jake. So real quick, 1 minute hitter on streamers.
Okay, yeah. So Miami, 41% rostered. They're home against Las Vegas Raiders and Aiden O'Connell. Even better, or maybe I don't know. We got Detroit, 30%. They're home against the Bears. The return of Justin Fields, where there will likely be a little bit of rust. It is still the Bears on the road. So, they're interesting. The number 1 ranking by Jerry, and I believe, I didn't quite catch Payne. And I'm right here with you, is the Washington Commanders. Now, listen, they've been dreadful in a lot of situations. They've been scored on, and they've traded away their good players. But they're playing the Giants at home and the good fella Tommy DeVito. The Giants' implied total in this game is 13.5 points.
Under.
Yes.
Take the under.
yes, under. And then, again, I'm seeing a lot of people saying go start the Chargers defense after seeing Love's picks at the end of that game and, the state of the offensive line. I don't believe
they'll
them.
get some sacks. They will.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, they'll get into some sacks, but, they're, again, we think the Green Bay offense is growing a little bit, even if it's baby steps. Chargers heading east. I don't know. It's came up in too many columns I'm seeing, and I don't trust this Chargers a lick compared to Miami, Detroit, and Washington, all of which are decent streaming options.
I agree with you. Yeah, as pessimistic as I am, I agree with you.
And I trust the Jaguars over the Chargers too. They've came up a lot, 20%.
Against Will
terrible
Levis.
Last week, but they're home against Will Levis, who is definitely going through some rookie pains right now. But maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a big DeAndre Hopkins game. Anyway, those are a tier below, but Miami, Detroit, and Washington are the 3 defenses you're looking to stream this week. I might have talked myself into ranking Washington number 1.
Oh, yeah.
But it's Miami, Washington, 1A, 1B, and then Detroit.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was, I think, 3 or 4 games with double-digit point spreads, but the only one that's probably available reliably is the Commanders' defense out there. And I know they trade away their guys. I don't think it matters. That's how bad the Giants' offense is overall. All right, so a lot of different questions. This one asking Jake, he's trying to trade for Jamar Chase. Realistically, would you be comfortable giving up some sort of package that involves Ramondre Stevenson, Dalton Schultz, or Trey McBride and Fields for Chase to improve at receiver? Maybe he has to throw in a JSN or Dell. It's tough with these questions when they're only listing their roster and not somebody else's, but they have mentioned their quarterback. The other team who has Jamar Chase has Trevor Lawrence. So could Fields be enticing to you in that scenario?
I mean, he's trying to trade for Chase?
Yes, trying to trade for Jamar Chase. That person who has Jamar Chase also has Trevor Lawrence.
I mean, sure, go ahead and offer him 3-4 fringe starters, but isn't this the epitome of bad fantasy trades that we see all over the place? I'll give you 3 or 4 players that I don't necessarily need in my staff.
Yes.
Here are my 3 best bench players for possibly the best wide receiver in the league. You're going to have to offer him something tangible for that to work. Otherwise, that's an instant reject button here. So
yeah, it's always your rule of thumb who's getting the best player in that deal. Well, it'd obviously be Jamar Chase. But the question is, do enough of those scrubby guys, and Ramondre Stevenson is scrubby, and neither is Fields, but you have to have the right roster that you're trading with, that they need multiple pieces. And at this point of the season,
basically you're giving up Chase to get a bunch of really hard lineup decisions every week.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that.
I agree. In a 12-man league, my quarterbacks are Sam Howell, or this person, the users are Sam Howell and Trevor Lawrence. He is being offered Tua. would Tua and his schedule, which is not very good for a playoff perspective, be enough of an upgrade over Sam Howell, who is, I think, top 6 overall in fantasy quarterbacks, and Trevor Lawrence, who I'm not selling any shares of right now. I think he will bounce back at some point.
Ooh, I hadn't even realized the tough playoff schedule for Tua. I actually turned down someone offered me Tua and Pollard for Kelsey. I think we talked about that last week, and I turned it down. And I was regretting it a little bit the week after, and now I'm thinking, okay, I'm glad I did that because look at these junk matchups here. But no, I think Tua is enough of an upgrade. What are they What do they have to give up?
They didn't say what they're going to give up, but it's hard with these questions. Like, I would like to know.
They're taking a good quarterback on with some serious weapons, and they're getting A-Chain back. I don't know how much that affects Tua, but I don't know. Interesting. I think he's a significant enough upgrade that you would want to trade a little. You could kick in a side piece with one of those guys to get Tua back for sure.
It really depends on what the deal would look like, but I actually feel very confident that I could make a championship-winning team streaming Trevor Lawrence and Sam Howell the rest of the season. So would you trade Zay Flowers straight up for Mark Andrews? I have Lamar Jackson already. Yes, I will take the Mark Andrews side of that deal every single time, right?
Yeah. Just I mean, they're similar scorers even without the position scarcity factor. So take the tight end.
Trey McBride or Sam Laporta rest of season.
I love McBride, but I'm still going with Laporta.
Yeah, I had said I have done this deal now twice, where I have traded Sam Laporta when I already have Trey McBride on my roster. Mm-hmm. And in that instance, I traded for Rachaad White 2 weeks before his breakout. And I traded for like some version of an upgrade at quarterback where I had Dak Prescott or Kyler Murray. So I actually feel very confident trading Sam Laporta, but that's only if your league values Sam Laporta the way he should be.
Exactly.
That's the only issue with this.
McBride's done it for 2 weeks. Laporta's done it all season long, right? And I think both are going to continue to do it all season long. If I had to say, if it's A or B, got to pick one, it's Laporta. But I think you'd be fine making a deal for one of them.
DK Metcalf or Puka Nacua moving forward?
Assuming Stafford's back, I got to say Puka.
Okay, I took
assuming
DK
Stafford
Metcalf.
Stays healthy.
Yeah, I took DK Metcalf knowing the Seahawks defense isn't very good. And I think there's going to be rest of season value for both these guys. But I like DK Metcalf with the touchdown potential, which is the one area that Puka Nacua hasn't looked good, and especially with Cooper Kupp back, his value has fallen off just a little bit. So I went.
Here's
DK
an interesting
Metcalf.
stat. In standard formats, DK Metcalf hasn't had double-digit fantasy points since week 3.
Puka Nacua hasn't?
DK Metcalf.
Oh, DK Metcalf in standard.
He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3.
Yeah, I'll still go DK Metcalf. Last question here.
Week 4. My apologies.
I replaced Saquon. Jeff Rogers says I replaced Saquon Barkley with Rachaad White at running back 2. But would I flex or should I flex Saquon or Puka? I don't know the scoring system. That matters to me in this one.
Yeah, man, what a great problem to have. What a great problem to have. Just be happy. Count your lucky stars, Jeff, and toss a coin.
Yeah, I think I'm going Puka. Although the Commanders' defense is way worse than was the Cowboys, and that's when Saquon Barkley wasn't involved. I think I'm going Puka in full point PPR, but standard it would be Saquon Barkley all the way.
This question could be the same 10 weeks with the same opponents, and each of them are going to have 5 good games.
Yeah, that's why they ask us the questions, the hard ones, Jake, so they can blame us if we're wrong.
But there are some questions that are so close that are actually true coin tosses, and that's coin tosses, and that's one of the tough parts to relay here.
Yeah, okay.
I don't have a strong lean there. Okay, maybe Puka 6 out of 10. Let's just say that.
All right, that does it for us on this edition of the Tuesday RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Of course, we're back in next week to get you set for those Week 12 waivers and get you ever closer to the fantasy playoffs. Again, thanks everyone for listening, and best of luck to your fantasy lineups.